oftentimes you see so many black men just yelling and screaming. And from what I've seen is it's that little black boy that never got to really express himself as a kid. So now he's this grown adult male, and now as a black man, and even in this society, whenever they see a black man screaming and yelling, people get afraid, people get scared, and people don't understand like this is okay. Unfortunately, we don't want anyone yelling and screaming at anybody, but it's because they're frustrated. They can't be heard. They feel, and it goes all back to just childhood.
Hey y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety from within the BIPOC community. I'm your host, Ray Donovan. Looking forward to this show today. We have Caleb with us, and I'm always happy when folks reach out to the show to actually participate and share their stories. It means that they proactively want to be a part of the conversation. So, really looking forward to getting into it today with Caleb. We're going to be going through his struggle, his journey to salvation from his alcohol use, and ultimately, one of the things that is most important that Caleb called out when he reached out to this show is that it's important as a black man to share our experiences with one another when we're kind of navigating these struggles and liberating ourselves through sobriety. So, as Caleb mentioned in his shout out, we don't have to suffer alone. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So without further ado, Caleb, welcome to the show.
Hey man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You got it, man. So Caleb's up in the chilly northeast of Connecticut right now, and he shared with me that he's trying to get himself down to Florida in the next couple of years. But in the meantime, I'm really hoping to kind of go all the way back to the beginning of your relationship with alcohol. How old were you? What kind of pulled you into the substance? And what did it mean for you over the course of your relationship with alcohol? And then more importantly, let's get into your sobriety and how you kind of made that turn for yourself after experiencing some of the darker days of sobriety. So I'll hand the mic over to you to kind of just take us back to the beginning.
Right. So basically, when I first discovered alcohol, I was like 10. So I was like very, very young. And my grandma had it lying around. And my dad, I think he was asleep and he must have had like a long day. He used to be a truck driver. So he wasn't always around as much. And I was just visiting for summer vacation. And I didn't even know like I had an addictive personality. But like after I had like that first like taste, it was just like, man, I'm hooked on it. And then all of a sudden, I remember I would wait for my grandma to go to sleep. And then I would just be like taking like little shots because she had like, I knew she had the wine in the, what was it called? The freezer or the refrigerator, or whatever the case may be. So what I would always do is wait for her to go to sleep, take a little swig, and then go right back to bed. And then like ever since then, like I was able to put alcohol down for a little while, for like at least a couple years, like 3, 4 years later. But then when I was like 14, 15 years old, like I'm stressed out with track and field and stressed out with basketball. Like as a black man, like a black boy at that time, like I'm not fitting in with anybody. Like, Earl Sweatshirt has a line. He says, "Too black for the white kids and too white for the blacks." And like that was my story. Like I didn't fit in anywhere. I could relate to black people by playing basketball, and I related to white people because I was like, very intelligent and very smart and like kind of nerdy and quirky. So it was like trying to play all these like multiple characters, having like all these multiple identities, and like I dealt with that all the way till I was like 18. But in between like 14 to 18, like 16 through 17 is like when my drinking just started to like pick up a little bit more. And then like in college, like that's when it just got worse, man, because I discovered alcohol, I discovered women, I discovered bars, clubs, and I got all this freedom on me, and I go from being this old like church boy, pastor's kid, and all that stuff, and dealing with religious spirits and all that other kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden, like I'm out on my own. Like my Bible is at home because I chose to leave it at home. I was like, I just went through a season. I was like, I don't want to really deal with God. I could just be myself. Like I just want my freedom. Like I think that's what happens with many churches is that they don't really know how to sit down and talk to young boys. So us young boys just kind of find our own way, especially us black men. So now it's like I'm a man, can't nobody tell me what to do. I'm grown, this, that, and the third. And now all of a sudden, like I'm getting drunk almost every weekend or every other day. And then it gets even worse when I turn 21 because like now I could officially buy alcohol. So like I'm already going through a I'm grown stage for the past 3 years. And I was like, now nobody can tell me anything. But then, I just ended up getting into more trouble. I ended up spending an extra year in college. I'm messing around with the wrong people, the wrong crowds, and things like that. And by the grace of God, I was able to graduate college with me just, putting my head down, remaining focused, and just trying to basically get my life together. And then I officially just quit when I was either 24 or 25. I remember just being at a bar and me and my friends were just getting drunk and having fun. But it was just something in my brain that was just like, it's not what I really want to do with my life. Like, I don't want to be doing this. So, like, I just decided after having like one last glass of Hennessy, I was just like, you know what? I'm done. I put it down. And January 2nd, 2019, I haven't touched a drink ever since. So,
So I mean, I appreciate that chronological breakdown,
yeah.
and I got a couple questions that kind of span from the time that you were 10 up until what date did you say?
It was January 2nd, 2019.
2019. Had you at any point in time tried to quit alcohol before January 2nd, 2019, or was that just finally a definitive moment where you said, you know what, this is not the life that I want to live. I'm going to move in a different direction.
Yeah, so like there was a period like it was the year after. It's like I got out of college and I was like, man, I'm not really doing too much of my life. Like I'm not very successful right now. I couldn't find a job to save my life, and I was like, I think I'm gonna have to start making like some better habits. Like it was a time in like 2017, I quit for like 8 months, but I'm hanging out with the wrong people, so I was just like, yeah, maybe I should just moderate it a little bit more, which didn't work out because every time a stressful situation happened, every time that I couldn't find a job or every time I was getting rejected by women, it's just all these like coping mechanisms. And then my coping mechanism ended up just being for all the things that I'm going through was drinking. So then in my mind is like, well, how I'm gonna deal with all these problems without drinking? And then after a while, I would just go right back to it.
Hmm, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I feel like when you're a young black man, we're kind of devoid of, appropriate coping mechanisms.
Mhm.
So, alcohol is an easy fix when you don't know that there's any other alternative, especially when you've been exposed to it, at a young age. I mean, I started drinking when I was like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned, 10 to 14, 15, you were sneaking wine or liquor from the refrigerator. Did your grandmother not get a sense that, that you getting into her stash, or were you the only kid in the house, or how did that go undetected?
That's a good question, man. I don't know how it went undetected because I was the only kid in the house, and I think maybe she just didn't care, or just didn't notice, or maybe I was just sneaky enough to leave a little bit of wine in there so it looked like I didn't take too much of it. But yeah, I got away. Yeah,
Gotcha. You mentioned that you're a pastor's son.
yeah.
Sounds like you spent a lot of time in the church. How did you reconcile your behavior and the actions of and physical kind of fallout of drinking with having to show up at church every single weekend? Again, how did that go undetected? Was it never kind of brought to your attention? Did it never kind of get in the way of your practice and your responsibilities in your role to the church? I'm just curious to how that played out for you.
Yeah, so like I was very like good at just being sneaky and just being that quote unquote functional alcoholic. So I already knew like, okay, just drink a little bit of this, brush my teeth, mouthwash, but all right, not too much right now. Do what I need to do for like the choir and like ushering and things like that. But then, when I don't have any of those kind of responsibilities, anything going on, then I could just drink a little bit more. So like in my mind, those were like the mental gymnastics that would play with me. So that's kind of how I would
Mm,
balance it. And honestly, people have always said I have a very innocent face. So people just say like he never looks like he does anything wrong. And just as a young black boy, like you don't have many people around you to show you the way. So you kind of have to learn through films, television, and like pastor has a teaching for like the 1960s, and here you are, it's in like the 2000s, and like you're going through all these things, and the church that I was a part of, they didn't think that it was a problem. They just thought everything was like either demonic or just prayed all away because they just didn't believe in that kind of stuff. But as I got older, as I started studying more about addiction, as I became a life and recovery coach, I started realizing like, people of the faith, especially black men, like need somebody to talk to. We got all these other issues that we're going through, but we that's how we would cope.
Yeah. That's one of the questions that I had coming into our conversation, and this doesn't have to, become about church,
Mhm.
but being that the church is such a kind of a pillar institution within, the black, community, why, in your opinion, do you feel as though that they're not able to appropriately address addictions that are happening within the community, specifically to like the young community, because there's so much coming at us, at a very young age? Like, I'm sure you've probably put a lot of thought into that as you've continued to evolve
Mhm.
as, someone who's still very spiritual, very religious, and also a recovery coach dealing with the reality of what that looks like for people in their everyday lives. Like, how does that kind of come across to you that the church struggles, at least from the outside looking in? I don't go to church,
Yeah, yeah.
but struggles from the standpoint of being able to address that aspect of, of what it is to be a human being.
Yeah, I think the thing is that it's too much over spiritualization to make it very plain. Like the men don't want to just talk to you like a regular man. They kind of want to treat you like a boy. Some of the women as well, they want to treat you like a boy too. So it's like when a young man is around like that 16, this is what I've seen. Like around 16 to like 25 is like a developing stage. Like who am I? Am I gonna go to college? Like what are my goals, my aspirations, and my purpose? And like here you have like a lot of these black churches and just churches in general, they're just saying, well, oh, well, are you going to be serving the Lord, brother? Are you going to be serving the Lord? And it's like, I'm serving the Lord, but like at the end of the day, it's like they want you just to be a pastor, a deacon, or an elder. And it's like you're trying to tell them, I don't think God is calling me to do that. So
Mm,
the what is it called? I guess the difference of opinion is if you're trying to just be like me, just having a regular job, talking to Christians about addiction or anything like that, if you're not doing it in a church, then like they'll try to, honestly, it's called religious abuse. It's just as plain as it could be. They will try to play mental gymnastics on you and they'll try to say, oh, well, you're not really serving God because your ministry is supposed to be in this church building. But the God that I serve, not to be religious or anything, but I don't think he wants me to serve in a building. Like the thing that God has gifted me with is just to talk to people like regular people. So church people in the church don't want to talk to people like regular people because they think everything is a spiritual matter, but some things are just mental. Some things are just physical. Like some men need goals, aspiration, and purpose. And also the other thing is they just don't want to talk about it because they're scared they're not, competent enough. But it's like there's a
mm,
lot of pastors, especially a lot of like black pastors I hear all the time in the news who are just falling into, sexual debauchery and all these other things, cheating on their wives. And like, I'm not condoning any of that, but it's like, most of these pastors in a lot of these smaller black churches, one of the main things that I've always seen through personal observation is that they're by themselves. They have no one to talk
mhm.
to. They have all these people who are like trying to stab them in the back. And as soon as they make any kind of human error, if anything, they're just like, well, that's not my pastor anymore. He's got all this stuff on him. And then it's like, of course he relapsed. Of course he has his sins because he can't talk to nobody. He's told to be the shepherd of the flock, but like all he's been told is all I need is Jesus. And as long as I have Jesus, then I'm good. But like practically speaking, like Jesus did give us people to talk to. But yeah, that's what I've seen in a nutshell.
No, it makes sense. Thanks for shedding that light. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So so then for you, January 2nd, 2019, you say, okay, boom, I'm off the booze. I'm not touching it anymore. I'm going to move in a new direction. What did January 3rd moving forward look like? I'm going to assume that you've been a religious man this entire time, or maybe you had to kind of refine and redefine what that was for you. I don't know. I'd love to hear how that journey looked like. But what did it look like for you once you stopped? Because when folks who, in my experience, and also the people that I've talked to, alcohol is just but a symptom of something larger that's happening with you, right?
Yeah.
So, what did that January 3rd moving forward look like for you from the standpoint of like the work that Caleb started doing on himself so that he could maintain his sobriety and also then become that positive contributing factor back into his community, which I know that you want to be.
Yeah, so like the thing with me is like I knew I just had to handle, my past. It's like, my father and my mother always got in like crazy altercations because they were both, religious. They were always trying to impress the church and always arguing about money and like domestic abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, all this kind of stuff going on. And I started, getting really big into like psychology, and I started realizing that I suffered with like abandonment issues, sometimes depression, sometimes anxiety, and things like that. And I had to realize like the church is good, the church is good, but like I need to go and like, get some help for a little while. So along the way, I recommit my life to God around, I want to say, 2022, around there. And then I found an actual program that like sat down and talked about male issues. So I was there for like about a year or two. We talked about purpose, goals, aspirations, and why we do the things that we do. Because then, I started just coping with like casual sex and pornography. And then I ended up just saying, I got to get rid of this as well. So ultimately I just said, you know what, I gotta just stop doing all these things. And I learned just ultimately I don't like to tell people what's going on, but then along the way is my healing journey, my connection with God. I realize is that God doesn't really want people to keep secrets. Like it's church folk who like to keep secrets because everybody wants to be this perfect Christian. And like being a perfect Christian is it's non-existent. Like as a Christian, you fall. As a man of God, you fall. Like anything that you're doing in life, whether you're like top of a company or a CEO, or you're a manager, whatever the case may be, everybody has mistakes, hurts, hangups. But like the more and more we keep it a secret all the time, the more and more things just get a lot more complicated. And like that's what I started realizing is like I just got to start being open and honest and just have my own solid community.
Hmm. Yeah, community is huge, particularly when you can find a community that you can be open, vulnerable, and truthful with. If you don't mind sharing, what was that organization that you found that enabled you as a man to kind of step into that space?
Yes.
Because I'd love to just put resources out on this show for folks who might be interested in taking a closer look.
Yeah, so the program for me was called Celebrate Recovery. I found it at a church. It was up in Manchester. It was called the Church of Nazareth. But Celebrate Recovery is found all over the world. They basically,
Okay.
it's very non-judgmental. They'll take really anybody. Their just main thing is that at least you're open. If you're not open, they're still okay with it. They'll still work with you. They don't try to force religion on you, which is what I love because you can't force God upon people. Like when I talk about God, I've seen people just go up to people and just say, "Hey, do you know who Jesus is? And if you don't know who Jesus is, you're gonna burn in hell." And I've seen people do that. And I'm like, that's not what you're supposed to do, and that's not what Jesus would even do. But again, like it goes back to legalism, religious abuse, and sober recovery isn't like that. Sober recovery just they'll take you as you are. They'll mention God's word. You can stay there basically as long as you need to. They don't call you or text you say, "Hey brother, like you missed a meeting, you're just trying to harass you," anything like that. Like if they check up on you, it's just, "Hey, checking up on you, see what's going on," but like they don't harass you every day or anything like that. So that's what I like about
Got you.
that program.
But it is a faith based program.
Yo, it is a faith-based program, yo.
Okay, cool. You mentioned earlier you also overcoming your addiction to pornography.
Mhm.
Did you start to recognize just internally that there were a lot of similarities between how you were interacting with the pornography and the role that alcohol once played in your life? Or how did that epiphany kind of come to light where you said, I need to now address this as well? Was it negatively kind of affecting your life in a way where you had problems managing the actual reality of being a man in the world? I mean, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so like my thing is I used to always write a lot of creative fiction. It used to always help me out to deal with like my hurts and bad hangups and stuff like that. And one of the things I had to realize is that, with pornography, you just constantly live in a fantasy world. And I did the same thing with alcohol. So for me, it was just like the same thing, man. I just always wanted to just escape everything. And like that's one of the issues with addiction in general, is that when you're always trying to escape, when you always have all these secrets, then you can't really be your full authentic self around people. And then people are just like, is just something going on with you? Is something going on with him? And you start getting like paranoid and very insecure with yourself. And like 9 times out of 10, people may not even be saying anything, but like the paranoia came from the alcohol, the paranoia came from the pornography, and just basically ultimately just not doing what I believe that God wanted me to do. Like ultimately, I just believe that God wants me to be this obedient, faithful servant, but like I was never taught what that actually looked like in practical application. And it's like here I
Mm,
was just getting older, and I kind of just felt like I was just left alone. There were people who were in my life, but then they walked away. So then I had all this bitterness and all these grudges. But as I got older in my recovery journey and my sobriety journey, I started realizing it was an ongoing cycle. A bunch of men who just, a bunch of black men who just didn't have any solutions. So we was just trying to figure it out as we go. And that's when I started realizing like it would just be better for us just as black men to really just stick together and just, put away the pride, put away the ego, even if we don't agree on all these things. But ultimately, when it comes to just addiction, like, look, listen, it's a problem that's plaguing all black men because it can lead to poverty. It can lead to just sexual sins. It can lead to just constant alcohol, drug use, all these kinds of things. Like, and that's what I do really just with my coaching, is that I just try to just break these things down to people, especially the men, and just get them to realize that, look, listen, we're in this together. I'm not against you. I'm not trying to hurt you, shame you, or guilt trip you or anything that you've been through. I'm just trying to help you out. I'll always be here if you need me, but I'm not going to force myself upon you.
yeah. I want to get into your coaching practice in, and also the philosophy that you coach from.
Mhm.
I think that's really important. Before I do ask you a little bit more about that, I am curious to learn a little bit more about what did you hold on to very tightly in preserving your sobriety against, all of these afflictions that you've come to recognize weren't serving you. Was it all kind of rooting yourself in your newfound faith? Was it also that, in addition to the community that you found, like what got you to a point where you were so confident and strong in your own sobriety that you then wanted to pass that on to others?
I think it was just I knew God always wanted to do something with me. But I think the thing was always just I've always been like a very like shy, quiet, introverted kid. And I was like, well, God, like I see all these people, all these pastors who are loud, over the top. Like I don't think I could be like that. And I would just have encounters with God, and I would just like talk to him like just a regular person. I'm like, God, what is it that you want me to do? Like, I want to do something for the kingdom, like, but what is it exactly that you want me to do? The more and more I talk to him, the more and more I talk to other people who, believe in God like myself, and other people that I just talked to in general, they all talked about, Caleb, you can encourage people, you can inspire people and help people. And like, that's all I've ever wanted to do in my life. My life has never really been about making millions of dollars. I just always wanted to just help people just to understand that, like, the life that we're living, we don't have to keep living in just complete silence and just suffering. Like, we could do something better with our lives. We should tell our stories, not just because we're embarrassed or whatever the case may be, but because we could help liberate others and have them say, hey, I'm not going through the same thing everybody else is going through. There's hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I believe that, I always believed God was going to do something with me. And
Yeah,
having my community around was also just a blessing as well.
that's awesome, man. Two more quick questions before we get into your work.
Mhm.
So you're still a pastor's son,
Yeah.
and obviously you're very vocal about where you've come from, within your own journey. How has that now also translated back over into kind of like your origin family and where you've come from? Have they been able to receive and respect kind of where you've come from in the journey that you've been on?
Yeah, I believe there's a respect there. I mean, some of them at first didn't like when I was, talking about the abuse that went on in the family and stuff like that. I will be honest, some people just kind of they felt some type of way about it, but after a while, I believe that it needed to be said because I just believe in not holding secrets and just being real about it. And like I told them, like, look, listen, like this isn't even about me. Like I believe this is what God wants me to do. And like you guys have said, like follow God and be obedient to God. And it's like, well, this is me being obedient to God. So my father, I mean, he's always up and down. His anger levels are always up and down, but him and I have a better relationship now. He understands what I do. He's just pretty okay with it. My mom had passed like 2 years ago, but she was okay with it though. She was very uncomfortable at times, but she learned to just accept it. Like this is what my son wants to do. So then she became supportive. Other family members, I don't really pay attention to it that much, but I believe that they respect what I do, though.
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to give you the shout out, man, because I know that number one, it's challenging enough to be vulnerable, right? And honest to yourself.
Yeah.
It's even more challenging to be openly honest and vulnerable, to the external world. And then to balance that with these like historical expectations that come with, origin, family, community that you've come from, and and dancing that dance. I know how challenging that is, man. So shout out to you for weathering that. I really do want to give you flowers on that. Um, so talk to me about your coaching, right? So I walk into your proverbial office, right?
All right.
And I'm Ray. I say, hey, Caleb, I got an issue with alcohol. I'm trying to figure this thing out. Walk me through your model. How do you put Black men in a position to be able to win against something that seems, at the time at least, that it's insurmountable?
So my thing is this is that I just try to just ease the conversation, man. I just open up about life, how's everything going, and then from there I just get a general gist of where the guy is at, where he's at in his current life, and then the guy is comfortable. I do dig in a little bit into childhood, only just to set the foundation, because I do believe in cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's one of the main tools that I use, not with every client, but with most of them. So if I could talk about the guy's childhood, I usually know with a lot of Black men, a lot of us have just been forced just to be an adult at a very young age. Like many of us grew up without fathers or even mothers or things like that. So that's the kind of example that I often see when I'm coaching Black men in general. And then I realize I just try to get them to understand is like, look, listen, like this is the way that you cope. So basically, your behavioral chain looks a little bit like this. You're always stressed out about all these kind of things that are happening in life, and you go to the alcohol. But after a while, you start making all these mistakes. You're chasing after all these women. You're in these bars. You're in these clubs, and you're starting to have a lot of hatred for a lot of people. And most importantly, you don't feel as if you're at peace. So I basically from there I explain that to them, and then we explore coping mechanisms like getting into the gym, walking around, getting yourself a solid community, whether it's faith based or not faith based. Getting involved in the community. I've learned that a lot of Black men, a good majority of them suffer in silence because they feel as if they've been left behind. They feel as if nobody needs them, nobody cares about them, nobody loves them,
Mm,
which increases their low self-esteem. And it's like when someone has low self-esteem, no matter what the addiction is, whether it's porn, alcohol, drugs, women, whatever the case may be, if a man has low self-esteem, I've learned with the coaching that I've been doing for the past year or so, they will start picking up a lot of bad habits. They will start, especially when it comes to drinking. Before it was probably just a drink here and there. And when they lose a job, whenever they get rejected by a woman, whenever they're not doing nothing with the community, or they feel as if nobody cares about them or reaches out to them, their drinking starts to increase a lot more. The drinking starts to decrease when they, feel as if they're at peace with themselves, when they feel as if they're a part of something, when they feel as if they have some kind of a purpose in life.
mm, that makes sense. I I- what are some of the common themes that you see, with the men that you're working with, as far as the coping mechanisms that that haven't been working for them. I'm assuming that like alcohol is like the predominant factor, right?
Mhm.
But what other things are they turning to in order to like ease their themselves in moments of tension and anxiety. And I ask that because I wonder sometimes if more men are in positions where they're addicted or abusing a substance and maybe not necessarily recognize that they are because they're not really thinking about it, but maybe there are other things that are happening in their life that they need to, just be aware of, that are not actually productive in them being, healthy, functioning, members and men in our community.
Right, right. So what I've seen is that a lot of them will turn to just, if it's not alcohol, they'll turn to pornography, they'll turn to women, they'll turn to drugs. And what I've often seen is the common theme is really just stress, boredom, and just pure loneliness. And that's the things that they often just gravitate towards because, they want to feel as if they're a part of something, but they don't really know what they want to do. So like also I'm a certified life coach as well. So I basically taken in my recovery coaching and my life coaching. I've mixed in the two because I've learned is that, so many black men, when they don't feel as if they have anything, just going for themselves, that depression starts to kick in. And also I've learned is that, many black men, especially the ones who go to church, I hate to say it, but a lot of them have been sexually abused by pastors. A lot of them
Mm,
have gone through a lot of just dark, deep secrets. Like, the secret was in my family that many people messed around. Like my dad, he messed around a lot. His grandfather messed around a lot, and nobody wanted to talk about like sexual sin. So oftentimes you're just seeing everybody around just drinking, smoking, doing drugs, and no one. And people are often saying, hey, don't pick up this alcohol, don't pick up this weed, this, that, and the other. But I've learned just with men in general, men look at actions, especially black men. Black men look at the actions that they see. So when they see black men who are productive in society and doing things, they say, I want to be like that. But when they see a black man who's just down and out, strung out, just getting drunk, getting high, and messing around with a bunch of women, they say, you know what? That looks like it's cool because they see the fast money, the fast cars, and things like that, and they just say, I want to I want to be more like that. So, and also I
mm,
realize that there's a lot of black men who have a disconnect with who God really is because of religion, because they just been taught to follow a bunch of rules and to read the Bible all day and night, and they haven't gotten like the practical application. Like men in general are always going to be practical. You tell a man something, he's like, okay, what's the practicality of this? What's the benefits? What's this, that, and the other? And when they're not getting that, again, it goes back to a common theme I've seen is they feel alone. And then a lot of them, because of addiction, they don't know how to properly communicate how they feel. Oftentimes, you see so many black men just yelling and screaming. And from what I've seen, is it's that little black boy that never got to really express himself as a kid. So now he's this grown adult male. And now, as a black man, and even in this society, whenever they see a black man screaming and yelling, people get afraid, people get scared,
yeah.
and people don't understand like this is okay. Unfortunately, we don't want anyone yelling and screaming at anybody, but it's because they're frustrated. They can't be heard. They feel, and it goes all back to just childhood. And that's ultimately what I've been seeing.
Mm. No, I appreciate, all of those perspectives. I think it's really important to shine a light on, just some of the broader challenges that men face.
Mhm.
I've been doing this show now for almost a year, and I've had a chance to talk to some, fantastic people, and I've just realized that there's just a lot of discomfort around being vulnerable, specifically, for black men. I don't even have as many on the show as I would like, because in a lot of ways, some of them may just not be comfortable sharing.
Mhm.
I don't, I don't know, and I wish that wasn't the case, but there are a lot of walls that we put up to protect ourselves from, the pain.
Yeah.
And I think that part of this process in pursuing sobriety, whether you're faith based or not,
Mhm.
is sometimes you got to step into the pain in order to grow. And I don't know if that's been your experience, as a coach. I'm by no means a certified coach, but just grasping from, listening and having conversations with others and how they've kind of moved through it. That's what I've gathered, and also in my own journey as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You have to go through some kind of pain in life. I think that's the thing about addiction is that addiction will trick your brain into thinking that, oh, well, we'll just put this off. We don't need to handle this pain right now. But then it's like you hold on to all these secrets, and then that's where what I've seen is that's where the depression comes in, the anxiety comes in, and all these other mental, physical, and spiritual gymnastics in your head starts to play around because as you were saying earlier, just the lack of vulnerability in so many men. And I've also just learned is that many men, when they're never really taught to be vulnerable, because I used to also work with autistic kids. And when I used to work in the school system as a paraeducator slash substitute teacher, a lot of them really just needed that emotional vocabulary. They need to just be told, okay, why are you sad? I used to have this one little guy. He was a trip, man. He was like 6 years old, but he wasn't that bad of a kid. But one of the things I realized, they kept saying there were all these things wrong with him. And I'm like, there's not a whole lot wrong with him. He just doesn't know how to express how he feels. So each morning,
Mm,
every time he would have an emotional outburst, I would say, okay, listen, why is it that you're angry? He said, "Cause I'm mad." And I said, "Well, why is it that you're mad?" He said, "Cause I don't like that." Because he was autistic, so obviously he didn't have the best, communication skills. But I would work with him and say, "Okay, listen, when you're mad, you need to take a couple deep breaths. Okay, it's going to be okay, and we could just go for a walk. You don't gotta destroy the classroom or hit your classmates. But like, and these things aren't taught because, in the school system, there's not a lot of men there. And, at home, there's not a lot of men there. And a lot of men don't really know emotional vocabulary. I mean, my dad was always a hothead. So every time I would do something, I get the belt. But then I learned that that
mm,
was his cycle because he got a tree branch to his back. And it was always Negro don't talk back to me. Negro don't say this, that, and the other. So it's like a common theme, man. You get told as a kid, don't say nothing, and then when you become an adult, obviously you don't say nothing.
yeah. And all this shit is just bottled up inside of you, just waiting to explode somewhere.
Mhm.
No, totally, man. Um, so what do you do today? I mean, you said that depression was a part of your story. Anxiety has been a part of your story. How do you cope with those things today? I mean, those are very real, real things to have to navigate within oneself. What do you turn to today if it's not some of these other things that weren't serving you?
So one of the things I turn to is prayer, meditation, but most importantly, just physical. I learned is that when you're battling any kind of an addiction, you always will suffer with some kind of a fatigue, and it just you don't really know exactly where it comes from. Me personally, I believe in just being practical. I go for walks. I'm going to the gym. I just got myself a trainer, so I'm in the gym 3 days a week. Basically, on my weekends, I get up, I walk outside in nature. I try to walk outside as much as I can, whether it's like hot or it's cold or whatever the case may be. But that clears out my head. And sometimes when I'm just in my meditation sessions, I just say, you know what? Everything's going to be just fine. This is just a temporary feeling. I'm not going to feel like this for the rest of my life. Just basically doing more positive self talk because the brain feels a lot better when you're not beating yourself up all the time. So I try not to beat myself up about things I can't change because, I'm not God, I'm not trying to fill those shoes. And at the end of the day, I just tell myself, as long as I just move forward in life and don't move backwards, I think I'm going to be just fine. And those kind
Mm,
of simple words, they've helped me out a lot. And, telling yourself that you're great, that you're special, that you're awesome. Like, believe it or not, I know it's something that a lot of men don't do very often, but it helps you out a lot more because you're going to go through anxiety, depression, grief, stress. I mean, all these kind of things in life. And I've known from coaching and, talking about mental health for the past like 6, 7 years or so, even from a spiritual and non-spiritual practice, men in general will beat themselves up about everything. And it's like we cannot be doing that all the time and expect to be moving forward. Like, and that's one of the reasons why we end up spazzing on people, getting angry and bottling up our emotions and turning to addictions as we've been discussing. It's one of the main things. It's like we have to let somebody know what's going on in our life. Now, obviously, you don't gotta tell everybody everything, but like you
right.
should at least have some kind of a close crew of at least 5 people or like 5 solid men, when they just say, hey, look, listen, this is what's going on with me. And that's what I truly do. And what I believe, I have my own close crew. And yeah, man, just trying to stick together and just trying to keep moving forward instead of backwards. So that's what's been helping out for me.
That's awesome, man. Having a crew, having that community of folks that you can depend on, that's something that I hear echoed over and over and over again. And the other side of that coin is how many people I talk to who don't have that, even in their sobriety, trying to hold on to it, still very much feeling like they are the lone wolves, that they were in their addiction, but now lone wolves in their sobriety, still trying to navigate life. And that's why we guess we got to take this thing one day at a time, because we're constantly trying to like fill these gaps that we're never really whole to begin with. So, but I appreciate you sharing what's been when working for you. And certainly like community is something that at least I've gotten to a point in my journey where I've tried to seek out, and recognizing that I may not necessarily have those like deep, meaningful, like, friendships on day one,
Mhm.
but I can work towards deep, meaningful connection, over the course of time, and recognize that that can have a positive contribution on my own outlook on life and how I'm showing up in the world. So, thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah, no problem.
I got a couple more questions as we kind of round out our conversation, and these are questions that I ask, really of every guest. So don't feel that there's a right or wrong answer. I want to be able to capture a library of perspective,
Mhm.
right? So the first question that I have is for someone who's sitting there, maybe listening to this show at some point in time, and tuning into our episode, and they recognize potentially that they have an issue. Maybe they're at January 1st, 2019, and they're saying to themselves, "I got to take a close look here at what I'm doing to myself with this alcohol or porn or whatever the affliction addiction might be."
Yo.
But they don't necessarily know what that first step could be. As someone who's been through it, and as someone who coaches others through it, what would your recommendation and advice be to that person?
Man, I would just tell people just to, not try to rush the process, because when you try to like rush the process and you try to rush life, you start having these thoughts of, oh, I'm a failure, I'm a loser. You find yourself in comparison culture. You can find yourself in being an imposter. And also one of the many things I always want to say is like, when you're coming off of any kind of addiction, like don't overdo things, because I've have a tendency just to like throw myself in so many things, and also just don't feel as if you have to prove yourself to everybody. Like, there's going to be people who are going to say things, but don't take it personal, because like when you're coming off of any kind of an addiction, your feelings and emotions are very, very high, and it's going to take a little bit of time. It may even take medication or holistic practices like, cutting out a little bit more sugar and all that kind of stuff, and more fitness and outside air and things like that. So you can balance your emotions a little bit more. But that's what I would tell people, like it's just one day at a time, right? Like don't sit down here and compare your journey to somebody else's journey. Like you're on day one, they're on day 1,000, but like you got to focus on your day one and your today and your tomorrow. That's what you focus on. Your today and your tomorrow, and practice just gratitude, and there's no need to be jealous of anybody. Like everybody has their bad hurts, their hangups, and their own afflictions that they deal with on a regular basis. So I would just say
Yeah,
just continue to cheer people on.
that's awesome, man. Last question I have, and I think that this conversation specifically is like probably, really best suited for this question,
Mhm.
being that we're both black men, and we just broadly speaking have an issue in our community around mental health, and seeking help around the constant combat that our mental health is in with the society around us. So my question to you is, when you were at your worst and you were struggling, how would someone have known that without you communicating it to them explicitly?
I would always say, pay attention to just people isolating and just drifting in and out. And also just pay attention to people not responding to phone calls and text messages. It may not be anything 100% serious, but it does raise major concerns, because, they're basically just trying to figure out what's going on. They probably spent so much time living in their heads. I know when I used to battle with addiction, I used to live in my head a lot, and sometimes I drink alone, and then I would look at other stuff alone, and just I would tell myself I didn't need anybody, and then make up all these like paranoid thoughts and feelings. But yeah, like one of the main things is just, getting on the phone and just, calling somebody. If you have it in your spirit, or your body, or just you just have this sense like, I just don't feel so and so has been with it. Please don't
Hmm.
do it in a group setting. Like there, I tell you, if you do it in a group setting with me, nah, everything's cool. I'm good. Nah, I'm good. Pull them to the
Right.
side or call them on the phone or text them. Be like, hey, I'm just checking in, man. We haven't heard from you in a while. You good? Everything cool? And that's that. Just take it from there.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. Opening up the channel and the dialogue, even if they're not necessarily, having the dialogue with you, I think them knowing that there's just genuine, you know, maybe concern is one word, but just like an acknowledgement that they're there and that you're thinking about them, and just letting them know that if there is ever a time when they need to come to somebody, that you're potentially a person that they can do that with without a whole bunch of judgment, I think is really important.
Yeah, most definitely.
Cool, man. So, lastly, where can folks find you, Caleb? I know that you're on social. I also want people to be able to find your coaching practice, whether it's for life or for their for their addictions. But where can folks find you if they need to reach out?
Yeah, basically the easiest way to find me is on a man named Caleb on Instagram. Basically, my website is Linktree. It's linktr.ee, and it's CHARRA. If you just click on the link, which you'd be able to find on Instagram, you can find my coaching, you can find my blog, you can find my books. You can always just DM me if you just want to just have a regular conversation, just get some things off your chest. But yeah, that's like the easiest way to find me. Everything that's on there that I do is all on there. So I'm always available. I try to get back to people as soon as I can. I mean, I don't get back to you right away. I usually get back to people within like 2, 3 days, unless I'm like on a vacation or just got caught up with a bunch of other stuff. But that's like the easiest way you could find me.
Cool. Well, look, Caleb, I really do appreciate you reaching out to the show. I was extremely happy when I saw your name come up, and glad that we got a chance to get together and chat a little bit about the state of our union as Black men. And also just to your point earlier, let folks know that you don't have to do this alone.
Mm.
And there's other folks out there who are finding ways to succeed against this thing that seems like it's almost insurmountable at times. So I appreciate you, man. I hope folks go out and look for you, and we certainly will be in touch.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks, brother. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days, or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices in healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.